Great. So I think people are joining, and this is a good time to start. It is a big pleasure for me to be here today, and I would like to start with a little bit of a story how I actually landed in talent intelligence field. 4 years ago, I was studying strategy. I was studying my master's in strategy, and I was doing really, really hard to get only excellent grades because my goal was to start my career in management consultancy like Bain or BCG, or at least Deloitte. But I was actually more lucky than I expected. And because of some coincidence and thanks to meeting some people who are probably present here today as well, I got into the field of talent intelligence, which I had no clue about back then. Now, after 4 years, I have a much better idea of what talent intelligence is about, and I'm very happy to have this honor today to be able to share with you my experience and lessons learned, and also my approach to talent intelligence. My name is Anastasiia Kolos. I'm Talent Intelligence Manager at Philips, and today what I'm going to be talking about is competitive intelligence. I'm happy to share with you my personal view and experience on competitive intelligence, and this is not necessarily representative of the views of my employer. So before I start deep dive into the content, I want to make an important disclaimer. During the coming 30 minutes, I'm going to use the word competition or competitors around 66 times. Competition may mean many different things. Competition in sports, competition in corporates, as well as the competition between nations. But for most of you, probably the competition actually means the war for talent or the competition on the labor market. And to avoid any confusion, by competition today, I would not be referring to the competition for talent, so not to the labor market competition, but I will be using the word competition in a much broader sense, which is the competition on the market between different companies. So by competition, I would mean other companies or even other industries who compete with your organization for customers, consumers, and market shares.
So naturally, you might probably be wondering, why do we need to talk about competition on the Talent Intelligence Forum? 10 or 15 years ago, very smart people were talking about disruptions or about disruptors. If a company found an innovative way of doing business in an existing sector, or who created a new market and was shaking up the status quo on the market, such a company would be considered a disruptor. However, the truth is that the world now is not about a disruption, but about the continuous disruption. We are living in a world where novelties of the mornings are becoming obsolete by evening. Disruptions, whether caused by technology, new business model, or even the pandemic, they are changing the every essence of our lives, the way we shop, the way we speak, the way we communicate, and most importantly, the way we manage organizations. This is now called continuous disruption, and we consider this a new normal. Actually, no normal is a new normal. If you're, by the way, wondering, I haven't read all of these books, but there are plenty of books about the new normal. For company, it means this: the business cycle actually gets shorter. In the old world, life cycle would start with the introduction stage, and then the business would grow, and then it become mature, and then during the decline stage, the company would start to think about changing something or transforming themselves. Nowadays, in the new world, successful companies start transforming at the right start of the growth phase, because otherwise it's becoming too late. Companies need to change or they would die. This requires companies to continuously adjust and reinvent their strategy. And what is actually strategy? The essence of strategy formulation is coping with competition. There was one smart guy, you probably know him, Michael Porter, who gave an extensive definition of how competition impacts company strategy making. And companies do not only compete with their current rivals, but they also have the threat of new entrants or the threat of substitute products and services. So here is my first answer to why we are talking about competition today. Continuously monitoring the competition and proactively reinventing the strategy to win the competition is the first step that companies need to take to thrive during the continuous disruption. But unlike augmented reality or unlike gene editing or blockchain, competition is not the invention of 21st century. The competition is as old as these worlds. Similarly, most companies, big and small, they would have some mature functions who are supposed to monitor these 5 forces. Those functions can be strategy, marketing, FP&A, sales, market share teams, and many other teams. We have all those teams at my company as well. And even more than that, we sometimes call external consultants to ask them help us give advice on competitive dynamics. So why on earth are we talking about talent intelligence in the context of competition if we have so many experts in corporates and in consulting who can help us say something about competition? Can you imagine that only this year, myself and my team of 10 people, we had more than 15 projects which were focusing solely on competitive intelligence, and again, competitive in a broader market sense and not labor market competition. And these projects were spanning across most of the geographies and most of the business groups. For each of these projects, we were called by these so-called mature functions to team up. So why do they need us? Why did TI become so important for competitive intelligence? And what is our role to play here? Now, let's look at what the company is in essence. Here is the very famous dogma of McKinsey, the 7S model, which says that the organization is the combination of 7 interconnected elements, which are all impacting each other. These 7 elements are used to assess the nature of the organization. As you can see here, strategy is only one part of it. Strategy is about where the companies play, what kind of actions they take to create growth and profits. But now look at all the other elements of this framework. They're all about people and workforce. The structure, which is nothing else than how companies organizing its resources and its main resource workforce. It's all about the skills, which is the combination and aggregation of individual competencies and skills of employees, as well as staff, which are in place, and style, which is also about the culture and leadership style. Enough of the strategy lesson now, I guess. So I'm going to tell you what am I doing in my job and how I developed the value offering for competitive intelligence within TI. So We evaluate the intensity of competition, the threat of new entrants of substitute products for our company. So we look at the strategy of our competitors. Just remember the Porter 5 forces. And we do that by looking at the structure, skills, staff, and culture of our competitors. Just remember the McKinsey framework of 7S. Let me put this again. We monitor where our competition is heading to, what is the risks that we will be disrupted in a particular market and by whom, based on the richness of talent intelligence data about our competitors, such as their structure, skills, staff, and culture. Of course, we don't do it in isolation, and all the functions which I've mentioned earlier, such as strategy, marketing, and FP&A, they are our partners in crime or our partners in competitive intelligence. We team up with this broad range of cross-functional teams, and we do enrich their data with talent intelligence insights to derive actionable recommendations for our markets and our businesses. It has been a long journey to establish these close and trustful relationships between the cross-functional teams, and I keep focusing on nurturing the mutual understanding of each other's strengths, but also at the same time on the scope of possibilities to bring this partnership to the next level. There is one tremendous opportunity for talent intelligence compared to traditional competitive intelligence team, and this is that the talent intelligence gives a glance into the future and not only the past or present events. Let me explain. This is the power of monitoring the hiring and firing of your competitors. If the company is planning to expand into China, the first thing that they would do is probably hire a bunch of people in China. If the hardware manufacturer wants to tap into a software world, the first thing that they would probably do is hire an executive with a software background and a bunch of software engineers. So these are very simple examples, but this is how it actually works. Changes in the org structure, in the workforce, and in the skills of your competitors are good predictors of the changes in their strategy or go-to-market approach. So that would be my tip on how to organize talent intelligence portfolio for competitive intelligence. We can look at where the competitors play and how the competitors play. And there are different ways how we can which we can use to derive insights here. For example, if you look at where your competitors play, you can look at how they're organized around location, let's say within a commercial function, and this will be a good proxy for you to understand where their go-to-market efforts, where their sales efforts are concentrated. You can make an extra step here, and you can also deep dive how these locations have been evolving over time, and you will be able to also give an advice of where should we be prepared for the move from our competitors. You can also look at the skill sets and backgrounds of your competitors, let's say of their salespeople, and you will be able to tell which segment of the market or which kind of markets or sales channel they're going to play at. Now, looking at how your competitors play, there are plenty of ways and insights that you can derive here. By looking at functions and titles, as well as the org design, you'll be able to tell your business and market stakeholders on what to expect from your competitors. You can also look at organizational structure, the team composition, span of control, and responsibilities. And if you are able to translate these talent data points into a business story, your market and business executives will really love it, because this is a unique data point that they would not be able to get otherwise. And importantly, also not forget to monitor leadership change or leadership appointments to your competitors. This is quite an easy to get piece of information, but really a high impact one. I hope you're still bearing with me. I don't see many comments in the chat. So if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to pin that. But for now, I'm gonna move on a little bit. And I wanna pause with TI, competitive intelligence stuff, and just share one important lesson that I've learned while doing this. And this lesson is about the business acumen. I assume that most of us here today are passionate HR professionals, and we are really data-driven with talent and people at our hearts. However, I think that in addition to these bright skill sets and characteristics, competitive intelligence also requires a very strong business acumen. According to Kevin Kolb, who is the author of this wonderful book, he says that the individual who possesses business acumen is the individual who views the business with an executive mentality. So those people understand how the moving parts of the company work together to make it successful. And also how financial metrics like profit margin or cash flow or stock price reflect how well each of these moving parts are doing its job. And these are 5 abilities of the person who can be described with a strong sense of acumen. They can see the big picture. They are able to understand the company communications and data, as well as the financial statements. They're able to use data to make good decisions. They understand company measurements, and they're able to effectively communicate. Where I'm heading with this is that the importance of having at least foundational understanding of key financial marketing and strategy data in context when doing competitive intelligence in TI. Not only is it needed to be able to understand your stakeholders, to understand their problem statements, and also to convince them, but most importantly, to be able to translate talent data into the language of strategy and finance. And again, only by translating talent data into a strategy narrative, you will be able to build a successful competitive intelligence offering of your talent intelligence team. To jump from theory to practice, I want to share a couple of case studies or examples of how I am using a competitive intelligence lens in my work. One study that I'm going to share is related to where the competitors play. The second one is around how to set the proactive advisory in competitive intelligence. And the third one is around partnering with a function which I haven't spoke about yet, but this is about the M&A and how we could use the competitive intelligence in M&A as well. So the first one is about the where to play. A while ago, one guy from our product development team reached out to me and my team, and he asked, hey, we have a cool idea that we are working on in a lab, but we have no clue how to commercialize that, how to bring that to the market. But what they knew at that time was the name of a couple of startups who were working on developing a similar product or a similar offering. But those startups were not yet commercial, so they didn't know what kind of value proposition they would offer for the customers. So they asked us if we can do some talent intelligence magic and help them get any clue on what those startups are planning to do. So we said, yes, we can. And with some talent intelligence magic, we were able to come up with this. We created competitors' archetypes by value proposition and market segments. So we've mapped out many startups as well as product teams of potential competitors, and we created archetypes based on which segment and also which value proposition they would play with when they go to the market. And when we actually did that, right, it was very clear that most of the companies would play in this segment, and a little bit of big players would play in this segment. So when we gave this back to our product team, they were, needless to say, they were really amazed because many of these things they didn't even know back then, but also they use it as one of the key inputs in developing their product roadmaps. And the truth is that there was no talent intelligence magic in it, no secret ingredients. That was just the state-of-the-art talent intelligence research methods and the sources which are familiar to most of you probably, such as LinkedIn, career website, and job postings. So the where to play, which I just spoke about, is just one example of a research question that you can work on as talent intelligence for competitive intelligence. And it's really incredible that talent intelligence can actually give insights and recommendations from the business on how to grow our top line. The second example is about setting up proactive advisory. And here, my point is that you don't need to sit and wait before a research question finds you or before a product team comes to you and asks for a question. You can set up a proactive approach to that. And you can, by this, you can bring your power of competitive intelligence by the next level, and you can establish a real-life, always-on competitive intelligence. Surely you would first need to understand what your competitors are as a company, what kind of industries are important to look at. But once you've said that, you can really focus on real-life monitoring of those players through looking at people data. Some of the key questions would be, what kind of changes in our competitors' structure, skills, staff, and culture are happening? And what would that mean for our labor market dynamics? We can look at how is the workforce composition evolving? What can we extract? What kind of insights we get from their hiring trends? What are the new leaders that are joining those companies? And my pro tip, and really big thanks to everyone who is doing that. But here with data science, advanced data analytics, and visualization, you can automate this real-life competitive intelligence to a very good extent. And then you can also bring it to being a self-service and self-reported tools. Here I want to pause with case studies and also share an important lesson that I've learned while doing competitive intelligence as a proactive advisory. An important lesson is here, how is this bringing any value to HR, where most of us are actually belonging to? So how I'm trying to solve this puzzle is through a more sustainable approach to knowledge management. And what I mean by this is that once we've discovered and once we captured all of the data of our competitors, we would just spend a lot of time to reuse and recycle it with a different storyline and with a different research questions at our hands. So we would put HR leaders as our main audience, and we would rephrase our key research questions into, let's say, how is dynamics of our competitors can give us competitive advantage on the talent market? What can we learn from the organizational setup of our competitors to make our company a better place to work? How does talent inflow and talent outflow actually tell us about the employee value proposition? Are we able to compete with our competitors on the employee value proposition? And many other questions that you can address. But the key takeaway is that you can really reuse the intel that you develop for other teams and also create a lot of impact within HR as well. So coming to the third case study is around the mergers and acquisition, and it's a whole big world. We can spend another lesson talking about that, but important is that mergers and acquisitions will always be there. In 2021, the worldwide cost of all the M&A transactions reached almost $6 trillion. And acquiring competitors is a common solution that company try to do when they want to beat the competition, when they want to tap into a new market, new product lines, when they need more people, or even when they just look for some synergies. So the M&A is something that many companies are deploying as part of their inorganic growth portfolio. But the key takeaway here is talent intelligence can actually bring a massive amount of value to the M&A process. What I think brings and really gives the competitive advantage for talent intelligence in the whole M&A process is that we mostly work with public data. We can have anytime access to this data. This data is confidential and we can keep confidentiality during working with data. We can also provide a certain level of objectivity when doing the analysis, and also we can bring a holistic view on human capital. So how can we actually deploy talent intelligence in the M&A context? And there are lots of different methods and tools that you can use. And actually, talent intelligence can contribute to any phase of this M&A process. Let's say in phase 2, you can contribute to identifying potential targets that your company might want to acquire based on the information about human capital of those companies. At the phase 3, so the diligence phase, you can conduct M&A due diligence of the human capital of the target company based on the public sources which are available to talent intelligence. On the phase 4, you can also help your company to negotiate the deal by bringing some insights about the management team, about the counterparty, and really help your deal team prepare for negotiations better. And also, you can surely contribute to phase 5 of the M&A process, which is the integration. And here you can support with the location assessment, with organizational design, and also with building and bringing the employer value proposition mix. I'm not aiming to cover it all, but at my work, I'm really working at each phases of the M&A process, and the impact that we've created so far has been really tremendous. I Googled a little bit on what is a good way to actually end the keynote speech, and Google gave me an advice to conclude with some call to action. So here's my call to action. Make sure that the business acumen is among the skills that you look for when building a successful talent intelligence team, especially if you want to tap into competitive intelligence world. We're ahead of finance or we're ahead of strategy, and you will discover much more value that talent intelligence can actually bring to the companies. Learn how strategy is shaped and formulated in your companies, and co-create with your strategy, with your marketing teams, with your finance team on how you can potentially bring value to them. Context matters, and competition is your context. And talent intelligence can definitely bring a lot of value for companies in trying to stay up to date with the context. So I think this gives us still a little bit of time for the Q&A session, and I would be happy to go to the Q&A and see what is there. So I'll go just one by one. Please define span of control as mentioned in the list. So span of control is basically how your hierarchy of the organization looks like. For example, let's say how many people are in the responsibilities of one people manager, etc., and how it builds to the top. And translating that into strategy and also the word of finance, this can mean a lot of different things. So I'm happy to also have a separate discussion on that after the Yapore. Can you please expand on org design and SPOC? Well, org design is something that I'm working on a lot as part of competitive intelligence. And again, the focus can be twofold. One, looking at org design of our competitors to understand what they're planning to do, where they're planning to expand, also what kind of business models they might be developing or what kind of value proposition that might be developing. But also looking at org design can help us just understand what can we learn, right? What can we learn as a best practice from key players in our industry, but also maybe in some other industries, and how we can bring this to our company to make it more successful. A comment from Toby: strategy and M&A can be an incredible tough group to build trust with. How did you approach this? Very great question. I wouldn't say they're a tough group to build trust with, but it just takes some time, of course, that needs to be invested in doing that. Also, I think one of the key ingredients is to show your interest in building those relationships, but also just build your reputation by constantly delivering the high quality work, by improving and trying to understand their language, trying to understand their world, and trying to understand how you can serve them better. In my honest opinion and my humble opinion, I think we're doing quite good with building those relationships. Benjamin, a couple of questions. How do you decide which adjacent sectors are of interest and which ones to focus on, given that there is so much competitors? Do you find that your competition is really different in different locations? If so, how do you navigate this? Great question, indeed. And here's why I spoke about actually partnering with your marketing teams and your market teams and your sales teams, because they know better. And I think also a key lesson for talent intelligence is that we shouldn't aim to boil the whole ocean, map all the competitors everywhere around the world, but we should be really focused on something. And so we first defined what are really the key competitors based on, of course, inputs from the marketing teams, let's say, whom we consider our key competitors, and we focus on those. And I'm focusing on those as part of, let's say, proactive advisory. And for other projects, I'm doing that a little bit more ad hoc. So depending which market the request is coming from or which business group the request is coming from, and then we really tailor whom are we going to look at to get the most value out of it. Jennifer, do you have a separate team that assesses competitive intelligence from the business side? Do they see the impact of having an in-depth analysis of who the business competes with for talent? It's a great question. There are a couple of questions in this question. So we don't have a separate team that would be doing competitive intelligence, but I think through organic development, we somehow develop some people with an expertise and also interest in competitive intelligence, and some people with more capability focusing on location analysis and skills benchmarking. So it's not a separate team, but it's just an organic way of developing a focus and a passion for something. And from the business side, do they see the impact of having an in-depth analysis of who the business competes with for talent? Yeah, it's not that easy to say, I would say, because on the one hand, of course, business is wants to see the in-depth analysis of the businesses that we compete with on the market, so on the business market. But on the other hand, it's also, I feel like, that the talent market and the type of talent that the companies are able to attract will also have an impact on how well our company is performing overall. And so it's also the role that TI has to play in educating business folks, market folks, on bringing that talent lens a little bit more as well. Jay, what critical success factors do you measure to ascertain whether your competitive intelligence work was meaningful? I think here the big focus is on actually business impact that we've created, and we usually work together with our stakeholders, such as strategy or marketing, to really define, if we do this analysis from our side and also from your side, how much of a revenue can we additionally generate for our company if we implement all of the recommendations that we provide. So it's really very much, again, top line driven. So how much are we contributing to growing the top line of our company? And here is how I would suggest is the way to measure the success here. And also feedback, and of course the NPS of the stakeholders. Should there be a TI-TA function and a TI and corporate strategy function, or should it be blended into a single group? Early TI teams are highly skilled in all HR things, much less in industry dynamics. Interesting question. My humble opinion is that it's better for TI still to sit within HR organization, not necessarily TA. And I'm not sure if from culture, but also from expertise point of view, it makes sense to be part of corporate strategy, but it will probably be different for every company, depending on how the company is set up. But still, the key is that we are working with talent intelligence sources, we are working with talent intelligence methods, and here's actually where really the power and the competitive intelligence, advantage of talent intelligence comes into play, that we are really uniquely positioned and we have the data which other teams just don't have access to or don't have any knowledge about. So still I feel like being part of HR, but just investing some time, but also efforts in building and nurturing the relationships with other functions, and this could be a path to create some value. I see some more questions coming, but we are over time. We are on time already. Thank you all for being here. Also, thanks for a lot of questions. I'm going to follow up on them, and just feel free to connect to me on LinkedIn after the session. Thank you.